Alors, on va commencer. Est-ce que je peux avoir un signe que la présentation, on peut la voir? Je vais assumer que oui. Merci.
Oui, Charles, oui.
Euh, Bonjour. Pour ceux qui ne me connaissent pas, je m'appelle Charles Thibodeau. Je suis le coordonnateur du programme des approches fondées sur la nature ici au réseau environnemental du Nouveau-Brunswick. Euh, je serai votre hôte pour cette série de webinaires. Bienvenue. For those who don't know me, my name is Charles Thibodeau, and I'm the Nature-Based Climate Approaches Program Coordinator here at the New Brunswick Environmental Network. I will be your host for this webinar series. Un rappel que l'interprétation simultanée est disponible. Si vous en avez besoin, choisissez l'icône Zoom appropriée. Simultaneous translation is available. Please select the appropriate interpretation Zoom button on the bottom of your screen. If you do not require translation, please stay here on the main channel. J'aimerais commencer
I would
par
like to begin by acknowledging that I am currently on the unceded lands of the Mi'kmaq people, and that most of the people participating virtually are also on the unceded lands of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqey, as well as the Passamaquoddy peoples. This vast territory is covered by the Peace and Friendship Treaties, which these peoples first signed with the British Crown in 1726. These treaties were not about the surrender of land and resources, but instead recognized the title of these peoples and established the framework for what was meant to be a lasting relationship between nations. I ask that we all take this opportunity to reflect on our relationship with the land and the ongoing processes of colonization and decolonization, which have a profound impact on the work of activists as well as environmentalists. The concepts of two-eyed seeing, seven-generation planning, and other forms of indigenous traditional knowledge are essential to ensuring a sustainable future for our planet.
Alors, bienvenue tout le monde à cette troisième.
So welcome everybody to this third in a series of 4 webinars. Thank you for being here with us today. A big thank you to Patrick Murphy, that's me, for interpretation today, as well as our other team members. We have Paul Gregory from Nature Canada, Adam Cheeseman from Nature New Brunswick. We also have technical help and employees from the NENB, Nat Gauguin, as well as Eleanor Wilner-Fraser, and all of the participants who are here today. And also, evidently, all the invited folks who are here today, the presenters and invitees. Also, thank you to the Funds and Trust for New Brunswick Environmental Network, which has allowed this event to take place, permitted.
For those who do not know where I work,
pour ceux qui connaissent,
the New Brunswick Environmental Network was established in 1991 and is a communication network that links together some 100 nonprofit environmental organizations in the province. Why is the NBN working on nature-based solutions? Well, nature-based solutions help promote our member organizations and their work, especially watershed groups and citizen groups as well. Also, for a nature-based solution to be effective, communication and cooperation with many different players and groups, public, private, government, have to be at the core of the solution. And finally, nature-based solutions are not only cost-effective and last longer than conventional gray infrastructure, but they also address climate change and sustainable development goals. So for today, here's our agenda of the entire webinar series, I guess. So from the beginning of the planning of this series, we wanted to provide a structured and informative sessions that will help equip participants with the knowledge and tools needed to successfully incorporate nature-based solutions into their communities. It aims to educate participants on the benefits and implementation of nature-based solutions, provide case studies and practical examples of successful integration of green infrastructure projects, and also discuss the financial, environmental, and social advantages of nature-based solutions, including the avoided costs from extreme weather events and reduced liabilities. With this in mind, we developed this 4-part online webinar series. Welcome to part 3. So today is our panel discussion. And to allow as much time as possible for our guests to have a meaningful conversation, I will jump right into the next part of today's agenda, which is the actual roundtable discussion. Before we do so, I'd like to introduce you all to Michelle Molnar, who will be hosting this session. Michelle has over 15 years experience in ecological economics and interdisciplinary research, focusing on conservation of natural capital using valuation, policy analysis, and public outreach. She has created and managed cross-functional teams, authored natural capital valuation reports, is past president of the Canadian Society of Ecological Economics, and served on the British Columbia's government's Climate Solutions and Clean Growth Advisory Council. Thanks, Michelle, for joining us today. Before I hand over the virtual microphone to you, I'd like also to introduce our guests on the panel today. So starting off, we have Serge Dupuis. Serge is a civil engineering professor at the Université de Moncton, specializing in climate change adaptation and project management, and recently a member of the National Adaptation Strategy Advisory Table on Resilient Infrastructure. His experience in engineering has focused on managing, designing, constructing, operating, and replacing public infrastructure. Serge has developed extensive expertise in asset management and in creating climate change adaptation plans for both urban and rural communities. He is a professional engineer, a fellow of Engineers Canada, the co-founder of the New Brunswick Infrastructure Institute, and was previously the president of the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of New Brunswick. Also on the panel today, thanks Serge, is Jenna Miller. Jenna is a climate change adaptation specialist for New Brunswick, working in a shared role between the Provincial Department of Environment and Local Government, Climate Change Secretariat, as well as Climate Atlantic, the climate services hub for Atlantic Canada. Her work involves supporting New Brunswickers in accessing, understanding, and applying climate change data and information. She has a particular interest in using natural adaptation approaches to reduce risks and vulnerability to climate change impacts in coastal areas. She holds a Master in Science in Climate Change from the University of Copenhagen and a Bachelor of Arts in Geography from St. Mary's University. Thanks, Jenna, for joining us today. And lastly, but not, she's not no way near last in the list, but we also have Jillian Hudgens. Welcome, Jillian. Jillian is the environmental strategist and program manager with the city of Fredericton. She coordinates the implementation of the Fredericton's climate change adaptation plan, community energy and emissions plan, and corporate energy and emissions plan by working with staff across city departments and external partners to move the needle on climate action and resilience. She has a background in earth science, conservation, and ecosystem restoration, and previously worked with a range of local and international non-governmental organizations before joining the team at the City of Fredericton in mid-2021. So we have some really interesting folks here. I'm going to hand it over to Michelle to start the conversation off. Over to you.
All right. Thank you, Charles. Can you hear me okay? Okay, wonderful. So I want to thank the panelists for joining us today. I'm just going to do my best to provide some moderation of their brilliance. So today we're talking about what's preventing the adoption of nature-based solutions in Canada and what can be done about it. The New Brunswick Environmental Network organized this session to answer that very question and to provide advice on how we might overcome some of those challenges. So let's dive right in. Each of our panelists have experience working on nature-based solutions and related projects within their communities. So I'm going to start by asking, what were the most significant barriers you encountered? And did you foresee those challenges? I'm going to start by turning to Serge and then Jenna and Jillian. So Serge, love to hear your experiences here.
Merci beaucoup, Michelle. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I used to manage a city's infrastructure for over a decade. And one of the problems we'd have is if you'd speak to residents kind of like to keep the community as it is. You know, residents, when you live somewhere, you say, I like it how it is, that's why I'm here. But when you look at the council or mayor, they want progression. They want things to progress. So in our province, I think we measure progress with buildings and development. And when it comes to developing areas, the easiest place to develop is the place where nobody wants the property. So it's the wetland or the forest or whatnot. So while I think residents want to keep those areas, I think when it comes to the development community, the developers, the people who want to build more buildings, usually for profit, I find they often convince mayor and council that this is good, and I think unfortunately in our province, like anywhere in Canada, instead of measuring our communities by how well we live there, it's by how many buildings have we added and how many more people have we added to our area. So when I started, when I was younger, when I was a kid, you know, marshland was a swamp, it wasn't worth much. We've come a long way since then. So now the marshland is important. We're protecting it, and I think we're going in the right direction. Now, other barriers I've seen was the initial costs of maybe you know, you have the natural assets that are already there, pure nature. Then you have the ones that are green infrastructure, which is a bit of both, which sometimes takes money to invest in at the start, a capital cost, not realizing that it's going to grow in value with time. And the final barrier is that when you're doing green infrastructure, which is it's you know gray and green or whatnot, it's new, it's non-conventional. Anything that's new or non-conventional is not easy to push through. So I think the more and more examples that we can talk about, the better it will be. And I have confidence in the future it will get there.
And did you foresee those challenges? Have you run into them perhaps in multiple projects where you've worked?
Foresee them, yes. I didn't think they'd be that big a barrier. I think it stopped pretty quickly in some areas. Really, that the tightness of development and building permits and the values was much stronger than the push from a few that really wanted to keep some of these investments there. And that's why I find the work that that Michelle does with NIA, where you're putting numbers, economics towards the value of our green infrastructure, will help in the future to be able to compare almost apples to apples when decision makers are actually making these decisions.
Yeah, and really start to have nature represented in decision making. So thank you. Jenna, maybe I'll turn to you. Same question.
Yeah, so I think that one thing that is a barrier on the ground with community members and like individual property owners is kind of a lack of understanding about nature-based approaches and how they are beneficial, and just kind of a tendency to go with what is already known, which it would be rock armoring to prevent the erosion issues that are faced in a lot of places. And going along with rock armoring, there's actually even just a wider lack of understanding that is not going to prevent flooding impacts. And yeah, so I think that it's something that those of us who work in this space and in the promotion of nature-based approaches need to be aware of, and we're already aware of. But when it comes down to it, those who are looking to protect their properties from erosion, and maybe those who actually do the construction of rock armoring in some cases, might need to be better aware of what other options they have.
Absolutely. So making this a bit more of a familiar approach as opposed to a novel practice.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing for the property owners who want the view They'll cut down their trees, which is just giving them the opposite,
Yeah,
of
opening
what
up
they're
their
looking for.
exactly. Well, thank you. And maybe I'll turn to our last panelist here, Jillian. Love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. So coming from a context of Fredericton, a municipality, we've tended to focus our nature-based solutions work on more on the protection and conservation of our resource, not necessarily building new nature-based solutions. For example, we have direction on our municipal plan to purchase floodplain lands when they become available. And we are working on terming this network our resilience lands. We just released our urban forest management strategy, and nature-based solutions feature really heavily in our climate change adaptation plan as well. But we've tended to reach out to external partners, usually community groups and nonprofits, when we want to take on like a large scale restoration project. Generally because municipalities are famously risk adverse. We're dealing with taxpayers' money, and decision makers tend to implement those more familiar solutions. Going back to that's how we've always done it, or sometimes those solutions provide more immediate protection or robust protection, but they don't have that host of co-benefits that a nature-based solution would provide. Some other barriers would be nature-based solutions can take more time to implement, require knowledge, and we, our staff is quite familiar with some nature-based solutions, but we often outsource a lot of our design and our construction work to third parties. So it requires knowledgeable consultants and knowledgeable contractors. And I know, Serge, you've been doing a lot of work with APEG-NB, professional engineers, on some awareness and knowledge building in that respect. And then I think finally would be the mandates. If we're thinking at a watershed scale, or even when we're thinking about private land, the municipal jurisdiction only extends so far. So if we're thinking about the watershed scale, we need cooperation of multiple municipalities. We need to get multiple councils on board with a solution. Who's going to pay for it? And on the private land side as well, we don't currently necessarily have any policies in place to say, for example, if a private developer has to put in a stormwater management solution, that it needs to be a nature-based solution. And often there would be some pushback if there was additional upfront costs for those, greener solutions over typical engineered solutions. So I think, like Jenna mentioned, that private development angle, there's still some work to be done there. Yeah, and to answer the last part of the question, do you foresee these challenges? Yes, the risk aversion of municipalities doesn't just stop at nature-based solutions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jillian. Okay, so definitely a range of challenges, from varying objectives to some traditional, maybe siloed thinking. I'd love to take take a bit of a turn and think about what were some of those practical solutions that could be implemented in communities to really support quicker and broader uptake of nature-based solutions to promote sustainable development. So really just interested in hearing your thoughts and practical steps communities could take. I'm going to slightly mix up the order of the panelists here. So maybe I'll start with Jenna.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I would say that, like, on a wider scale of Atlantic Canada and New Brunswick, not all municipalities have the resources of Fredericton, for example, and have already these policies in place that are looking to purchase land that's on riverbanks or prevent flooding in or construction in risk zones and things like that. So we need to be providing support to other smaller communities that don't have these policies in place so that there can be wider implementation of land use planning measures to limit construction of hard engineered measures before they can cause issues, or to prevent construction in risk areas where we're going to need to then go and protect them and cause more issues if you're using not nature-based solutions. And yeah, just also like Fredericton has already taken this step and understands what natural assets they might already have and what's around them to purchase when those things come up, but also helping smaller communities to understand what wetlands and dunes they already have and the protective measures that those naturally provide to their community, and that it's better for them to not do new construction within those areas.
Absolutely. We found in a lot of our work that it's usually the smaller communities that still have intact, connected natural spaces. So it can be a very cost-effective approach to meeting service levels. Wonderful. Jillian, I'm going to turn to you with the same question. What practical steps would you recommend communities consider to implement nature-based solutions?
Yeah, certainly having a policy to lean back on, something that council has adopted previously, that, when you bring up a project and they ask, potentially why it costs more or why we're leaning towards a solution, and saying, well, we adopted this policy, you've committed to it, so here's the solution we're proposing that follows these policies. But as Jenna mentioned, that does take time. It takes council education, it takes staff education. We're still continuing to train folks in our organization, and as I mentioned, like the engineering consulting community, construction contractors who are knowledgeable about building solutions, maintaining solutions. I think also having like standards documents, so similar to engineering standards of building a stormwater pond or building a rock armored bank. Having those documents in place that the engineering community is familiar with, I think, is important. And then I'll go back to the partnerships as well, because this is something that a community of any size can lean on. We have some really great nonprofit groups in our community and in the watershed area who bring forward projects. They're able to access funding that the municipality may not be able to access. So when they come forward with a project that may be even fully funded, it's much easier to get that on the schedule and give that the go ahead, because it may not be at the top of our capital project list, which is very long, but we may be able to give the go ahead to that solution because the partner group has come forward with the knowledge, the dollars, and potentially even the maintenance plan in the future as well. So yeah, I'd like to give a nod to all of the great nonprofit groups and other community groups out there working on nature-based solutions in New Brunswick and beyond.
Absolutely. Key partners with particularly smaller communities, as well as research institutions. So we have done work and pulled on the knowledge of students. And with that, maybe I'll turn it to you, Serge, and you can share and promote the brilliance of of your colleagues.
Thanks. No, these great answers, and true, universities, colleges, and students are vibrant, and I think the younger generation is more in tune with protecting, and we should take advantage of that fervor that they have. Now, other practical steps when I used to work at the municipality is using relevant case studies. So when I used to work at the city, I'm not going to reinvent something or I'm not going to be the first one to try something, or usually that's not the best thing, but show me another municipality. And when I say irrelevant, I mean close by. I don't want to see something in Florida that they've used that works great there. It's show me someone I know and, oh, I could easily call these people and that it's working for them. I think that goes a long way. I'll jump on the non-for-profits. Michelle mentioned for the small communities, but even for the big cities, this is almost like free labor. It's almost sad to say, but and the most passionate people who understand, as soon as you give them a little light of a project, they're going to jump on it and be your biggest stewards on moving things forward. And I can't stress that enough on how pleasant it is to work with these people. So I meet, and they're everywhere in our province. They're everywhere. So I think it's easy to pick on them. And with the NBEN here, they've got a little network that you can actually pick on them all. Other ones that I'll use that are maybe less sexy, land use planning. One example is in a bigger municipality here in New Brunswick, we're growing, which is a good thing. But I've noticed that they're creeping onto lands where a river or brook runs through, and right now it's all forested. And I'd say I actually told the planners, I said, look, you should put a zone right on that right away that nobody's going to encroach on that brook. Nobody's going to cut any trees on that brook. Because, anybody with a few dollars says, I'm going to put my house right on that brook. And you can't stop them unless you have some rules and regulations in place. And you can do it in advance. You see it. You know it's going to happen. Protect them right away. And the final one I'll say is I work in asset management for municipalities, really, and you can include natural assets in those requirements, which is it's one way of protecting, or actually at least mentioning it and putting it in the discussion with everything else. So those are a few items that I'd see could help communities actually move ahead with NBS.
Thank you. Okay, so let's say tomorrow morning you wake up and your dreams have been responded to. You have sufficient funding and support for a nature-based solutions project in your community. What would be the next major challenge that you would want to address? So you have the support, you have the funds. Where would you put your energies? And Serge, maybe I'll turn to you first and ask for your thoughts.
So few things there. It depends if the land has been acquired, or are we okay with the development community that we're using this area to either enhance or to protect? How's that going to affect some people who have already planned on that, which is a big thing. And then after that, I'd go to a bit of what Jillian was saying is it's kind of a non-conventional way to do things now, and there's not many consultants or contractors that are familiar. So then you want to have a product that responds to all the the requirements that you're looking for on a nature side, and then on the engineering side, I could say too, that it's functional for what we need. So I see that as the biggest impact right away. It's not common enough.
Thanks, Serge. Jenna, what about you?
Yeah, so coming off of what Sal's just mentioned about the lack of expertise, or there not being very many contractors who are able to build these kind of things or have the knowledge for that. Another barrier that they face in construction is actually having access to the materials that they need to construct. So this is something that I've heard from a lot of our nature-based organizations across New Brunswick, that when they're looking to construct nature-based projects, they don't have access to native plants. And that's one of their biggest barriers, that they're not able to access enough of the species that they're looking for. And it's hard to find them because they aren't necessarily always being stocked by plant nurseries. So a lot have started working directly with plant nurseries to ensure that they're going to have access to the plants that they're going to need for their projects in the coming season. But if we're looking to have wider implementation of nature-based projects, then that's something that's going to need to be addressed at a higher level.
Absolutely. So, yeah, the challenge of having those native plants would be yeah, a wish for going forward. Um, and then Jillian, if you had, all of the funding and the political support to implement and to address the next challenge, what would it be from your perspective?
Yeah, I think echoing both Jenna and Serge, some of their arguments, even though in this hypothetical scenario you have your council support, I think jumping in and doing a huge project maybe not be the best first step, maybe starting small, finding a project that you could scale up over seasons or years, particularly due to some of the material constraints like Jenna mentioned, or the lack of knowledge potentially in either the consulting or construction industries right now, starting with those small projects and scaling up and building knowledge within the community, consultants and contractors. And then finding local solutions, within your peer municipalities that you can tour, like looking at what other communities have done, like Sarah said, projects that you can go see with your own eyes, relatable projects in similar ecosystems, and ask lessons learned or where they sourced the material or who they worked with on a particular project, really starting those conversations, the opportunity for peer learning and connection between communities, I think is really important.
Absolutely. Sometimes, it's the local municipalities who are the best spokespeople for your work. So this brings me to, I'd love to pick everyone's brains a little about collaboration. So in many of the projects that we've completed, we think about what is the appropriate ecological scale for addressing this. And we often will promote watershed scale management. Now, of course, communities don't always adhere to, or nature doesn't adhere to political boundaries. So we're often encouraging municipalities to work with either their neighboring municipalities or perhaps some key environmental sector folks in their areas. So I'd love to hear if you have any recommendations or if you've experienced successful projects where collaboration has really occurred. Yeah, so I'm gonna mix it up again. Jillian, love to hear if you have any recommended advice for enhancing collaboration.
Yeah, I'm going to highlight the great work by the nonprofit and nature-based community groups in our province. I think they can really be the glue that binds the municipalities together. There's not always a lot of conversations that go on between staff from one city or town and another. We're busy. We're focused on our own jurisdiction, and there's sometimes not a lot of time or just initiative to reach out to other folks. But groups in our province who work, whether they're a watershed group who has that larger mandate or a provincially mandated group, they can let municipal staff know what's going on, what's worked in another town or city, and even provide some consistency of the types of projects that are applied, along a river at the watershed scale, between municipal boundaries. So I think groups like that are really important for sharing knowledge with the municipalities, the consistency of the projects, bringing funding into the province as well for those types of projects, and speeding up the schedule at which those projects can be implemented.
Thank you, Julian. Serge, maybe I'll turn to you.
So one of the best stories I have, and it's recent enough, at a large community that had prepared a plan on protecting their wetlands. And they were connected wetlands, so smaller wetlands connected together in a new type of area. And then the city or the municipality had an infrastructure there, a building which needed access. They had a little roadway going into it, but then it needed to be upgraded. It needed another access for vehicles to come in and out. So the engineering community there, which I am part of, not where I was working, but I'm an engineer first, I guess, would say they wanted a roadway straight through the marshlands to get to an easier access to another roadway. Made sense, it's the quickest way, cheapest to get there. The city planner said, well, no, we're trying to protect these marshlands. Can we find another option for an access road? And I was involved at the end when I heard this talking, and it never got resolved. And I was wondering why it never got resolved. So when I met with the planner, and I'm an environmentalist also, so I try to meet in the middle. And I said, look, I think if the engineer would understand your point of view, and maybe we could try to understand the engineer's point of view, could we meet in the middle? So we actually set up a little mediation meeting over lunch, spent a couple hours talking, and then we found another area that a third option to push the road for access, protecting the marshland, even making it more accessible to people. And at the same time, it responded to what the city needed for a second access that was efficient. And again, it was like a coup match for all. And one of the best stories I have, and that was recent enough. And it's just communicating and being honest and upfront and sharing really what you really need. It's not easy for all to do. And I think the role, it just happened that I played, was a mediator to kind of prod questions, a bit like Michelle's doing right now. Like, okay, what do you think here? And I think that helps, because we all work in our little silos, and to be a little more open with each other, I think we'd advance much quicker.
Wonderful. I love that story. I'm going to keep it in my pocket and throw it out there. Jenna, maybe I'll turn to you for your thoughts.
Well, I think that first of all, having events such as this one where people get to share different points of view and what's already happening are an important first step. But to bring in an example for something that's happening in other provinces, so through the Sustainability Center in BC and the Transcoastal Adaptation Center for Nature-Based Solutions at St. Mary's University, there are local government working groups that have been created for collaboration on nature-based projects in both Nova Scotia and British Columbia separately. So maybe this is something that we might want to look at having formed on a local government scale in New Brunswick as well, for communities that are already interested in this kind of work, to be able to have a forum to get together to talk about their projects and collaborate on what solutions they've come to. And this is also already happening at a smaller scale between the nature organizations in New Brunswick who are working on projects like this. I've been invited to a sort of not real working group, but a group of organizations that are working on living shorelines style projects to talk about to talk through issues that are being faced on that specific type of nature-based project. But this kind of thing could be scaled up to include not only a few local NGOs in one area, but to be more provincial scale, and bring in maybe local governments at the same time, because they're already collaborating on these projects when they're working on them on the ground. So having wider working groups might be helpful just for knowledge sharing purposes.
Yeah, yeah, starting some networks, right? And expanding things, for sure. No, that absolutely makes sense. So I think we're getting close to, we wanted to allow some time for a question and answer from the audience. So I'm just going to ask one last question of you folks, and then maybe I'll turn and see if anyone wants to flag a question in the chat, then we'll make sure that we get to audience questions as well. But just before we do that, we know that nature-based solutions provide a range of co-benefits and advantages. Who is missing from the conversation when we think about how to really reflect that range of benefits in the solutions that we're promoting? And Jillian, I'll turn to you first.
Yeah, I was trying to sort of think outside the box on this one. I know Fredericton, we like to promote ourselves as very green. We're very proud of our tree canopy. And we've done some tourism messaging around it, but I think there's an opportunity there to really focus on, the really great things that make our community what it is. And for all communities across New Brunswick, right? We have beautiful natural resources. We have beautiful forests and wetlands and shorelines. And I think there is, whether that's local or bringing people in from other areas, highlighting those benefits to your community. Sometimes the ecosystem services, co-benefits, as important as they are, they don't necessarily resonate with our residents. People don't quite understand what that means, but I think everybody can understand, the aesthetic and the physical well-being, the mental well-being benefits of the beautiful natural spaces that we have here in the province. So I don't know if that tourism angle has really been tapped into, or even from like a real estate point of view. But if it hasn't, I think there are some opportunities there.
Yeah, definitely building on the reason that people come to your communities, right, is often owing to the natural spaces in them. So absolutely some key benefits to think about there. Jenna.
Yeah, coming in off of your real estate mention at the end there, I was thinking along the lines of kind of like newcomers to the area, and real estate agents who are kind of helping them find where they're going to be living here. And if there's a wider understanding on the level of real estate agents, where properties are along the coast, or along rivers, might be in a floodplain, to help folks understand that side of it, and what might be necessary in terms of protection for the property, and also just that the calm of the ocean in the summer won't be the same in the winter, or during the hurricane season. But yeah, I think that we need our messaging to reach a little bit wider to folks that we aren't used to talking to, who might be new to the area and not know uh, not know our nature as well.
Yeah, and the range of benefits it offers, such as
Exactly.
mitigation from extreme weather. Serge, I'd love to hear your perspective on are there any groups that we need to engage further?
I think the groups are already known. It's just I'll pin on engaging further. If you ask any Atlantic or East Coaster, will say, we're quick on lamenting on what's going on, but say, so would you move somewhere? What do you like about where you? Oh, well, I like here. It's quiet. We like the nature. We take it for granted. We take for granted what we already have. And often enough, we lose it before we get to speak out on it. So I'll even say we have some people from the West Coast moving to the East Coast. So I hear it's it's a good spot out here. But I'll go a little more on using people that have already felt the benefits. So the relevant examples. Let's grab those people who have felt it and have built it to come speak to others. I do a presentation, which I did on the first one on this series was a natural basin that was naturalized for stormwater retention. Now it's a park. It's got trails. You couldn't tell it was engineered and built, and it's 20 years later. So I take people into the future saying, if you invest now, this is what it could look like in the future, which is my next point is nature-based solutions. The investment grows with time versus my beautiful concrete pipe, which I still love, will deteriorate as soon as you put it in for the rest of time. And my final point is, and the other panelists had mentioned, is on real estate. Real estate's a big deal here for developers. It's all about selling land and getting new people in, but your real estate will increase in value if you're nearby a nature-based solution. And you're not just increasing in value, it's got people will want to live near these nature-based solutions once they're there. And that was one of the story I mentioned just before is by putting a roadway with a bit of developable land near the wetland would be an added bonus for the realtor and for the developer, which they can sell their properties for a little more. So not just for newcomers, but for people who are already living here, who maybe want to be close to the city, but still feel like they're living in rural New Brunswick. So I think it's a bit of that we need to add into our municipalities now.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely. So, while I'm going to wait and see if we have some questions from the audience. Maybe I'll pick your brains just a little further. So how can we be flexible in planning and implementing nature-based solutions as projections for climate change continue to floor us, and we continue to see these extreme events. So I want to pick your brains a bit on how we can be flexible in our nature-based solutions projects under changing climates. Serge, I'll go right back to you.
No trouble there. I think a bit of what we talked today is having a person moderate maybe the discussion on, and compromising in the middle. I really feel that we are developing, we are growing here in the province, which is a good thing. But then again, it can't be to the detriment of everything else. So where can we meet in the middle to protect maybe the best areas while we might have to fill in a few swamps? Let's protect and still do development. And the one thing I'd say too is do a pilot project. Call it pilot. Everybody loves that. We don't need to hold on to it. It was mentioned earlier by Jillian. Let's do a smaller project, see how it works. And I think that's one way we can easily be a bit flexible. And you just need one developer to be on board. And we've had one experience where a developer, the city I used to work, built smaller homes, row housing, called them environmental, made smaller lots with the trees were protected. And actually at the start, it was difficult to sell, but once the people were there, they were selling quickly and people were enjoying the green living on a smaller scale. So it's all just need to almost push it as a pilot to start. And I think it will come in the end.
Great. And I do have a question from the audience for you, Serge. Do you have any stats to share on real estate values? What is that increase for those properties near nature-based solutions?
I do not. I do not have any hard stats, but so I would think I just use our intuition. We're saying, look at the areas in the town or in the community you're in. Where would you like to live? Then have a look at what's around there. And I'm pretty sure you'll figure it out by yourself. Or ask your group or your say, what are the best spots in town? Oh, this is a good spot here. Why is that a good spot? Well, there's a brook that runs, or the community trail runs nearby, or the park is over there. Okay, maybe that's one reason. And having a stormwater pond, well, at least it's not going to be a big high rise there. It's protected. You've got a bit of wildlife there. I think most people would enjoy that. There's a few that love the city living right on the concrete, right downtown, and that's fine. But other than that, nothing hard as of yet.
Yeah, just because I have this in my pocket. Generally speaking, and of course, real estate prices have changed in the last 5 to 10 years. But the last about 10 years ago time I had dug into that, it's about a 15% on average increase if your home is near a green space. So I'll just let the audience member know about that. So same question for you, Jenna. Love to hear your thoughts on how to plan and implement projects given climate projections.
Yeah, so first of all, I guess I would just hope that folks are looking at climate projections when they are planning projects like this to sort of figure out the best options available to them, like looking at flood risk in the future, how much area will be flooded under certain projections, or projecting current erosion rates into the future. There are tools that are available to look at these things, like flood hazard maps from the province, erosion mapping from the province. And I guess if you join this webinar next week, you can hear from me about Climate Atlantic's Coastal Adaptation Toolkit, which provides lots of different solutions for erosion and flooding issues based in climate change projections for particular pieces of land based on what it looks like there.
Absolutely, no, brilliant. Something my husband and I were doing as we were moving a few years ago.
Yeah.
So I do want to turn it back perhaps to Charles to wrap us up. I see there were a few hands up, and I apologize I didn't get to you, but please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us after the fact if you have some questions. And Charles.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, Serge. Thank you, Jillian. Very interesting. Ingrid, I think you had put a question in chat. I think we kind of answered it. Maybe we can squeeze in Kristen. Kristen, I'm gonna ask you to unmute and ask your question quickly before we wrap up, if you can do it fast.
Yeah, actually, so thanks for that. I just had a question related to, and it was something that I can't remember who mentioned at the beginning, but the discussion around natural assets versus nature-based solutions versus green infrastructure. I know one of the things that I think could be a barrier is that there's a lot of confusion around the community what those means, right? I mean, even in the professional community, what is the line between a natural asset and a green infrastructure, right? So one of the things that comes to mind is, I know we think of natural assets as something that are, I think, Serge, you said it was pure nature, but if we need something that has a bit of capital uptake, that could be maybe green infrastructure. But things like, I'm curious to know what in your mind, what your definition or what your communities are viewing, things like planting street trees, right? Like that does take capital investment. It does take investment to maintain natural assets. So I guess just something I wanted to flag and get some perspective on of, can you guys give some examples of what you would consider a natural asset versus nature-based solution or a green infrastructure, and where that line is? And have you also experienced confusion within the communities around that?
Yeah, we actually talked a little bit about this before we started the call today. I'm going to ask Serge and maybe Jillian to answer quickly on that one. Serge. We might have lost Serge. Jillian, perhaps?
Sure. I don't know who's
You see my
sharing their
screen just quickly, Shal? Sorry, it was on.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Serge.
See that graphic there on the side?
No, we see your inbox.
No, the wrong one then. So don't worry about, oh, wait, I'll just move it over here. So I've got some here from Ontario Green Infrastructure Coalition. Nice little take here on green infrastructure, nature-based solutions, natural infrastructure, and the street trees would be under, called them earlier, urban trees under nature-based solutions, low impact development. So there are items out there with definitions. I myself am not a big label guy, and I think it's a little more complicated. So I started calling them, what did I say, health investments. So I'm just using that for anything we do, and just putting in the health investment for the community. But that's my little 2 cents there. I'll let somebody else speak.
Thanks, Serge.
Yeah, I think, Kristen, to your comment, there has been a lot of confusion, and I think Serge, you showed that diagram. Nature-based solutions encompasses natural assets and low impact development and some green solutions. So there's a bit of confusion. I think speaking, when I'm speaking to council, or if I'm speaking to the community, just referring to the forest or a naturalized wetland or our street trees, like calling them by their names that people can recognize. Oh yeah, the park in my neighborhood full of the beautiful Acadian forest trees. I know what that is. When we start bringing in some of the jargon, people tend to get confused or tune out or turn away. So I think just going back to what it is exactly that we're talking about and the benefits that relate to their lives, whether it's clean air, clean water, physical well-being, a place for their kids to run around and experience nature, really talk about those tangible benefits that speak to them.
Thanks for that. Thanks again, Michelle, Serge, Jenna, and Jillian, for this very insightful discussion regarding the challenges of implementing nature-based solutions. Let's continue working together to educate folks on their benefits and with hopes of seeing more green infrastructure projects in the future. Thank you again, Patrick, for your interpretation work today, as well as Eleanor and Nat for your technical help. And thank you everyone who joined us. If you haven't already done so, register for next week's event, the last part of this 4-part webinar series, which will be the digital workshop. I'll be introducing the benefit cost analysis tool that the NBN developed along with Green Analytics and inspired by the World Bank. Jenna will be back talking about the coastal adaptation toolkit that Climate Atlantic developed. And we'll have a representative from the Green Municipal Fund, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Arshad Akhtar, who will be talking about a new online course called Building Climate Resilience into Asset Management. So I hope you all join us again for part 4. Thank you again, and have a great rest of the day. Bye, everyone.